Reasons why I want to start football instead of basketball is, and I am the author of the James Harden is going to make this team a much better team than what a lot of people expect crowd. So, if anybody should be starting to do some of these early victory laps, you think it would be myself. We'll get to it at 3 o'clock, I promise. And then all throughout the show, we have more than enough time to do that. But I want to get to a convo that I think is going to highlight what the NFL draft is from a Browns perspective. And I've seen this one coming down the tracks for a couple weeks now. I was talking about authoring up takes. My initial thought on all of this was you have to go offense. And I said I was going to be as close-minded gets when it comes to the defensive side of the ball. But the NFL conversation that's going to exist, like our quarterback conversation existed last year, is simple. Caleb Downs at 6 or offense. And I think that's where we're going to have the divide. That's where we're going to start to have the split. I'm sure there's a lot of people that want to tell me, just trade down, move away from the pick. Don't take anyone at number 6. That's not on the table. This is going to be like when I had family dinner growing up, okay? My mom would put 2 options on the table. You got to choose. There's not a third option coming out. You got to choose. Offense at number 6 or Caleb Downs, what many people believe is a generational prospect. Dane Brugler was on with Ken and Anthony earlier today, and he said where the Browns should stick at number 6 overall with Caleb Downs. Here we go.
I firmly believe in taking best player available when you're drafting the top 10. Needs change week to week, year to year. But with this team specifically, it just feels like defense wasn't the problem. And does Caleb Downs upgrade your defense? No question. And not only what he brings to the field, but what he brings to the locker room. And that's something that would make the team better, make the organization better. I think it comes down to what is the gap between a guy like Caleb Downs and your highest graded offensive player, whether it's a receiver or offensive lineman. What is the gap between those two? If the gap is a decent-sized gap, then I think you have to go Caleb Downs. You have to go with the best player on your board and stay true to that. If it's close, then I think you look at your offensive line. You look at wide receiver. Because it's not just best player available. It's who's going to make the most impact for your team. And for this Browns team specifically, they're so void of talent on the offensive side of the ball, they would almost have to lean in that direction if the grades are even somewhat close.
Now, you see how that's almost like he splits the baby. That's almost him riding the fence of sorts when it comes to that answer. At first, he starts off and says best player available. By the end of the clip, he's wondering what I've been wondering this entire time, and whether or not you can go for an offensive player, because the difference between an offensive lineman, the difference between a wide receiver, and the difference between Caleb Downs is not so significant, even if you think Caleb Downs is the better of all 3 of those options, and you need offensive linemen and you need wide receivers in the absolute worst way, Daryl.
Well, there's another consideration to this conversation as well.
Okay. Because I already did the family dinner thing. You get 2 options.
No, it's not about the options. It's that could push this over the top in favor of going best player available, which a lot of people are projecting will be Caleb Downs there at 6, and that is that Grant Delpit's in the final year of his contract.
Yeah, I mean, of course, that's a part of the consideration for sure. I think that's more than just a part of the consideration. I think that significantly moves the needle. I'm not letting Grant Delpit stand in the way of whether or not I draft a safety or draft a wide receiver or lineman.
No, I'm not saying he's standing in the way. I'm saying his contract status could motivate you to take what ultimately would be his replacement.
Yeah, no, but that is saying that he'd be standing in the way. Like that'd be the idea that you would let Grant Delpit dictate whether or not you take a safety or don't take a safety. And I don't subscribe to that. Mainly because I believe wholeheartedly this team needs to work on the offensive side of the ball. I believe Caleb Downs is a really good player. I don't know that Caleb Downs is a Hall of Famer. If you're taking a safety at 6 overall, you got to promise me he's going to be basically a Hall of Famer. And for most teams, most situations, Daryl, I can get on board with the idea that that's best player available, and in the top 10, a lot of times you just got to take the best player available. But in this instance, I think we have so much work to do on the offensive side of the ball that I can't subscribe to it. I can't get on board with what they're trying to sell me here, because these tackles and wide receivers, they're going to be good, and they're going to be to a level that the Browns need. You know, offensive linemen, if you want to get a Pro Bowler offensive lineman, you got to give him the first 15. You want a chance to have somebody that's going to be there every single week. That's got to come in the first 15, Daryl.
Well, also keep in mind that the Browns have some very good draft capital at their disposal. Mm-hmm. And the fact that they finished where they did allows that draft capital to be in very good position. They're going to have 4, maybe 5 of the top 120 picks.
Right,
You should be able to stack your roster with impact players with those 5 picks, similar to what Andrew Berry did last offseason with similar positioning. And that includes him trading down from 2 to 5. What you need Caleb Downs to be, though, is to justify the pick, to your point, is he's got to be like the next Ed Reed. He's got to be the next Ronnie Lott, right? He's got to be on, the Brian Dawkins level.
An all-timer, yes.
Right. And I think that he projects to be a perennial all-pro type of player.
Most people that we're talking about at number 6 project that out,
right.
in some fashion or another.
Which means that if you're a perennial all-pro player, you're going to be a Hall of Famer. It's not Pro Bowl anymore. Pro Bowl don't matter. Pro Bowl got ruined this year, so that no longer matters. But all-pro, okay? And if he's projected to be a perennial all-pro, that to me translates to he has Hall of Fame potential.
Yeah, but he's not the only person that we're talking about that is in the top 10 that is. That's the other part. That's part of this. I think people get mistaken. It's like,
but these are the options you're giving me. You're giving me Caleb Downs or offense.
Yes,
so
and the offensive side of the ball still has great players too. Is the other side of this? Like that's the thing I think people miss on this. I think people miss the idea that if you don't take Caleb Downs, you're going to end up with some sort of scrappy. And like last year, you got your luxury pick. Last year, you went Mason Graham and you took him over Tate McMillan. You badly needed a wide receiver, and I said fine. Get your luxury pick. That's all right. You want to work on the D-line. You want to make sure Myles Garrett can feast and get as many sacks as possible. All right, fine. Take your defensive player. Let's get the best defense you possibly can. Let's see what happens. And you know what I saw happen? Mason Graham was a fine football player. Very fine football player. Good. I wouldn't say great by any stretch of the measure. There's a reason why Schlesinger won that award. But I did see with Tate McMillan was an awesome wide receiver. Right. There's a lot of really good players that exist in this little frame that we're talking about. And so it's not putting up against what Caleb Downs' career could be versus some slappy. As if I hate this assumption that the right tackle you take or the wide receiver that you take at number 6 overall is just going to be a player that sucks. How did that become the case? There are so many good in a wide receiver stacked class. There's 3 of them you can take in the top 10, all with Pro Bowl caliber talent and everything you want to say. How is that the case? How did it move to Caleb Downs as the only player that could have some sort of high ceiling here?
Well, and Tate had over 1,000 yards receiving. Now, keep in mind, these are players at the position. I did the math the other day.
Yeah.
Because I was just curious to just how bad the wide receivers performed last year. Mm-hmm. And again, part of that had to do with the quarterback situation, but the receiver room was not good.
You mean the Browns receiver room?
Right. Yeah, 1,450 yards from players.
1,457, I think, is the number.
Yeah, to the players that actually play the position.
And I know that number only because our conversation earlier in the week about adding a problematic player in Tyreek Hill,
yes.
Nick was like, it was 1,600 yards. I wouldn't do it. And I'm like, that's more than the whole room had last year.
Right.
You have to do it.
Yeah.
What are we talking about?
Right. I'm not interested in Brandon Ayuk either. But, again, production.
And so think about it. If you had Tate McMillan last year, and I don't want to do a redraft, I'm happy with what happened. But ultimately, if you had Tate McMillan last year, your offense probably looks a little bit different. And then maybe we're not crying about having one of the worst offenses in the NFL, like the Panthers, for instance, that had this big jolt and think about it. They went from a nothing burger of a team last year to all of a sudden in the playoffs. And a lot of that had to do with Bryce Young's connection with Tate.
Also, they did make the playoffs, but they still were below 500.
Yeah, they were 8-9.
Let's not get it twisted.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry. 8-9 is still, it got him in the playoffs. It is what it is. But that's more of a problem with the playoff system than it is the idea that the Panthers got into the playoffs.
Or their division being that bad.
But think about again, there's a lot we can get into with Panthers football and why it sucks. But Bryce Young, not a good football player in my mind at all. But McMillan kept making play after play after play, and all of a sudden, you saw how this works.
I kind of feel like the Panthers not being any good, that's a conversation you need to have with Nick.
I don't think he cares about the convo, for being honest about it. I think he's long gone out of Carolina. As he rightfully should. I don't think he cares at all about what's going on there. That's in his rearview mirror, Jimmy Butler style, where he only keeps the front windshields on his car. He just slices off all the rearview mirrors on his car because he doesn't want to look in the rearview mirror. That's Nick with his cars now. Have you heard that story before?
Yeah,
Jimmy Butler, absolute psycho. He buys these like $300,000 cars and just chops off the rearview mirrors because he can't look behind himself.
I had to censor myself because I almost made a joke about
No,
a certain.
it's not a no-shot Friday.
A certain
it's not,
Charlotte Hornet.
It's not a no-shot Friday. We're taking shots here today, Daryl. We're getting frisky with it today, Daryl.